I stood in the dark basement of my uncle's antique shop, gripping the strange, rusted key in my hand. My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be real. Just hours ago, my wife, Emily, had laughed in my face. "Enjoy your inheritance of junk, Brian. My new boyfriend has a mansion and money." She packed her bags without a second glance, slamming the door behind her. Now, alone in the shop, I had nothing left to lose. That's when I found the note in my uncle's desk. "Use the key. The truth is behind the bookshelf." My hands trembled as I turned the key in the hidden lock. The bookshelf creaked, then slowly slid open, revealing a dark passageway. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. What I found changed everything. Dust swirled in the dim light as I stepped into the hidden room. My breathing was shallow, my fingers tense around the key. The air smelled of aged wood and something metallic, like old coins or rusted iron. A single, flickering bulb dangled from the ceiling, barely illuminating the space. At first glance, it looked like a storage room, filled with wooden crates stacked against the walls. But as I moved closer, my eyes landed on something that made my pulse spike. A safe. It was massive, an old, steel beast with a combination lock. My uncle never mentioned anything about a safe, and I had no idea what could be inside. My hands shook as I ran my fingers over the numbers. The note hadn't mentioned a code, but something in my gut told me that this was important. I tried the obvious choices: his birthday, the year he opened the shop, nothing. Frustration burned in my chest. My life had already collapsed today. My cheating wife left me for a richer man, mocking me on her way out. And now I was standing in a dark, secret room chasing after a mystery I didn't even understand. Then I noticed something carved into the wooden shelf beside the safe. 4 digits, barely visible under the dust. I brushed my fingers over them. 1968. I turned the dial, my breath catching with every click. The lock released. The safe door groaned open, and I reached inside, expecting money, maybe old jewelry. Instead, my fingers brushed against stacks of documents, a small leather pouch, and something cold and heavy. I pulled it out. A gun. My stomach twisted. What the hell had my uncle been hiding? And more importantly, who was he hiding from? I stared at the gun in my hand, my mind racing. It wasn't just some old collector's piece, it was loaded. My uncle, the quiet old man who sold antique clocks and dusty paintings, had been hiding a firearm in a secret room. Why? Setting it aside, I grabbed the leather pouch and emptied its contents onto the table. Gold coins spilled out, old but polished, along with a small notebook bound in cracked brown leather. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, and as I flipped through, a name kept appearing over and over. Donovan Reed. I didn't recognize it, but something about it made my skin prickle. Was this a customer? A business partner? A threat? A loud bang from upstairs jolted me. I froze. The shop had been locked, I was alone. Or at least, I thought I was. Footsteps creaked above. Slow, deliberate. Someone was in the shop. I shoved the notebook and coins back into the pouch, grabbed the gun, and crept toward the passageway. My heart hammered in my chest as I peeked out into the dimly lit store. The front door was still closed. Who the hell had just walked in? Then I heard it, a voice. "You really thought he'd leave you with nothing, huh?" I knew that voice. My blood ran cold. Emily. I stepped into the light, gun in hand. And there she was, standing in the middle of my shop, wearing a dress I had never seen before, holding onto the arm of a man I had never met. He was tall, smug, with slicked back hair and a designer suit. The type of guy she'd always said she wasn't interested in. The type of guy who definitely had a mansion and money. Emily smirked. "Guess we had the same idea," she said, glancing at the safe door behind me. Too bad, babe. We're here for what's ours. I tightened my grip on the gun. Ours? I asked, voice low. Her smirk widened. Oh, don't play dumb, Brian. You think I didn't know? My new man here, he used to work with your uncle. Before he ran off with something that didn't belong to him. I glanced at the guy, and he grinned. Let's make this easy, man. Give us what's in that safe, and we walk away. I exhaled slowly, my brain catching up with the situation. My cheating wife hadn't just moved on, she had been waiting for this moment. She left me because she knew something I didn't. The inheritance wasn't worthless. It was dangerous. And I had just opened the door to a past I knew nothing about. I kept my grip on the gun, but my hands were steady now. The pieces were falling into place. Emily hadn't just left me because of my supposed worthless inheritance, she had been planning this. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice cold. You leave me, humiliate me, run off with this guy. I nodded toward the smug bastard beside her, and now you waltz in here like you own the place? Emily crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. Oh, Brian, don't be dramatic. This was never yours to begin with. Your uncle screwed over the wrong people, and now we're just here to collect what he owed. I glanced at the man beside her. Donovan Reed? The guy's smirk faltered for a split second. Gotcha. I took a slow step forward, keeping the gun at my side. Funny. Your name's all over my uncle's notes. Emily's expression darkened. Then you know you're in over your head, she said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. Seriously, Brian. Just give us what's in that safe, and we'll forget you ever existed. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh yeah? And what happens when I say no? Donovan's expression shifted from amused to dangerous. Then we take it anyway. The tension snapped. Emily lunged for me, grabbing at the pouch on the desk. I reacted on instinct, shoving her back. She stumbled, knocking over a glass display case with a loud crash. Donovan moved fast. Too fast. Before I could raise the gun, he threw a punch, landing it square against my jaw. My vision blurred for a split second as I staggered backward, my grip loosening. He grabbed my wrist. We struggled, the gun shifting between us. He was stronger, but I was fueled by pure rage. My wife had cheated on me, laughed in my face, and now she was trying to rob me blind. Not today. I twisted my arm free, driving my knee into Donovan's gut. He grunted, stumbling back, and in that moment, I raised the gun. Click. Try me, I said, breath heavy. Emily, on the floor, looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Her smugness vanished. Donovan raised his hands, that fake confidence flickering in his eyes. All right. No need to get violent. We'll just. A loud siren blared outside. Police. All three of us froze. Someone must have heard the fight, the crash, the shouting. Emily's eyes darted to the door. We need to go, she hissed at Donovan. But he didn't move. He stared at me. And I knew this wasn't over. See you around, Brian, he said smoothly, before grabbing Emily's wrist and yanking her toward the back door. They vanished into the night just as red and blue lights flooded the shop. I exhaled, lowering the gun, my hands finally shaking. Whatever my uncle had been involved in, I was in it now. The moment Emily and Donovan disappeared through the back door, the shop was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. The sirens were deafening, but my head was pounding even harder from the fight, the betrayal, and the realization that I had just stepped into something much bigger than I could handle. I should have just let her go. Instead, I was standing in my uncle's ruined antique shop, holding a loaded gun, with the cops seconds away from busting through the door. I had no time to think. I needed a plan. I shoved the leather pouch inside my jacket, wiped the gun for prints, and slid it under the counter. Just as I took a deep breath, the front door burst open. Hands where we can see them. 2 officers stormed in, guns drawn. I raised my hands, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Think, Brian. Think." "Sir, we got a report of a disturbance." "What the hell happened here?" The officer scanning the room took in the shattered glass, the overturned furniture, the safe standing wide open. His partner kept his eyes on me, waiting for an answer. I swallowed. "Lie. Tell them something. Anything." I own the place," I stammered. "Inherited it from my uncle." I was closing up when 2 people broke in. A man and a woman. They tried to rob me. The first cop frowned. "And they just ran off?" "Yeah," I nodded, forcing a shaky breath. "Back alley. Probably long gone by now." He exchanged a glance with his partner, then lowered his weapon. "You okay?" I let out a breath. "They bought it." "Yeah. Just rattled." That wasn't even a lie. "All right," the cop sighed, holstering his gun. "Let's take a statement." "Got any security cameras?" **T, no. My uncle never installed them," I said quickly. They looked at each other again, and for a moment, I thought they didn't believe me. But then the first cop just muttered, "Of course he didn't," and pulled out his notepad. I went through the motions, giving them descriptions of Emily and Donovan, leaving out the fact that one of them used to be my wife, telling them how they'd attacked me, making myself sound like nothing more than a random victim. The real question was, what was I going to do next? Because if Donovan Reed was after my uncle's secrets, and Emily had been in on it the whole time, that meant I was a target now. And I had no idea what the hell I had just inherited. By the time the cops left, my shop looked like a crime scene. Glass shards littered the floor, shelves knocked over, furniture out of place. But I didn't care about any of that. My mind was still racing. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and went straight back to the hidden room. The safe was still open. I grabbed the leather pouch and the notebook, flipping through the pages again. Donovan Reed's name was everywhere. One line stood out. "If anything happens to me, Brian must never trust Donovan. He will come for what's inside the vault. He will kill for it." I sat down hard on the wooden chair. My uncle knew this day would come. He knew Donovan was dangerous. And Emily, she knew too. I clenched my jaw. How long had she been lying to me? Had she already been with Donovan when we were still married? Had she just been waiting for my uncle to die, for me to inherit this place so she could swoop in and steal whatever was hidden here? My hands tightened into fists. She played me. I should have seen it. The way she started going out late, her phone always flipped screen down, the sudden excuses about girls' nights that didn't add up. The way she looked at me in the end, not with love, but with boredom. And now she was working with the man my uncle warned me about. I exhaled, forcing myself to focus. "Think, Brian. What the hell did Donovan want?" I flipped through the notebook again. More scribbled notes, dates, locations, nothing made sense until I saw it. "Vault key is hidden in the last place he'd expect." My eyes darted back to the safe. This wasn't the vault. My uncle had something bigger, something more valuable. And the key to it was hidden somewhere in this shop. I suddenly felt exposed. Donovan and Emily left empty-handed, but they'd be back. And next time, they wouldn't just try to intimidate me. I had to find the vault before they did. My gut told me this wasn't just about money. My uncle had been hiding something far more dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow outside my shop made me tense. Every passing car had me reaching for the gun I'd hidden behind the counter. They were going to come back. I knew it. So I needed to be ready. By sunrise, I had torn apart every inch of the shop looking for the vault key. I checked under floorboards, inside old furniture, behind paintings, nothing. But then I remembered the note. The last place he'd expect. I stopped, looking around. What was the last place someone like me would ever think to check? And then it hit me. The junk drawer. I ran to the back room, to the small wooden desk where my uncle used to do his paperwork. I yanked open the middle drawer, old receipts, dead pens, loose screws. Just like I expected. But at the very bottom, beneath a pile of yellowed papers, was a single brass key. It was smaller than I expected, with an intricate design etched into the handle. My uncle must have put it there knowing I'd overlook it. My pulse quickened. I had the key. Now I just needed to find the vault. I turned, scanning the shop, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. In the far corner, behind a row of antique cabinets, stood an old wooden grandfather clock. It had been there for years, collecting dust. My uncle never sold it, never moved it. And suddenly, I knew. I grabbed the key and rushed over. The clock was massive, heavy, but when I pressed my hand against the side, it shifted. My breath caught. I pushed harder, and with a low groan, the entire clock slid away from the wall, revealing a steel door. A vault. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the lock. For a moment, I hesitated. Whatever was inside, it had been hidden for a reason. But I didn't have a choice. I turned the key. The lock clicked. And as the heavy door swung open, I finally saw what my uncle had died protecting. And it was worth killing for. Inside the vault, the air was stale, untouched for years. A single dim light flickered overhead, casting shadows across stacks of old metal lockboxes, bundles of cash wrapped in faded paper bands, and several thick folders filled with documents. But it wasn't the money or the papers that stopped me in my tracks. It was the case. A black, hard-shell briefcase sat on a metal shelf, positioned right in the center like it was the only thing that truly mattered. I stepped forward, my hands sweaty as I reached for it. The case was locked, but my uncle had left behind a notebook full of secrets. Maybe the combination was inside. I quickly flipped through the pages, searching for anything that looked like a code. And then, near the back, I found it. 31,289, do not let it fall into the wrong hands. I swallowed hard and turned back to the case. My fingers moved quickly over the lock, pressing in the numbers. Click. The latches popped open. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting in a foam cutout, was a single USB drive. That was it? I picked it up, turning it in my fingers. No markings, no labels. Just an ordinary flash drive. But if my uncle went through all this trouble to hide it, if Donovan Reed was willing to kill for it, then this was no ordinary piece of tech. I needed to see what was on it. I turned and froze. Emily stood in the doorway, a gun aimed straight at my chest. "Thanks for doing the hard part for me, babe," she said, smirking. I should have known she'd come back. I didn't move. The USB drive was still clutched in my fingers, the weight of it suddenly heavier than before. Emily stood just inside the vault, blocking the only exit, her grip steady on the gun. She wasn't playing games anymore. I forced myself to breathe evenly, keeping my voice calm. "You're making a mistake, Emily." She laughed. "Oh, Brian, sweet, dumb Brian. The only mistake I ever made was wasting years on you when you had this the whole time." She motioned toward the case with the gun. "Now be a good boy and hand it over." I glanced past her, scanning for any opening, anything I could use. There was nothing. The vault was a dead end, and she had me exactly where she wanted. She stepped forward. Come on, babe. Don't make me do something we'll both regret. Lies. She wouldn't regret it. I saw it in her eyes, there was no hesitation, no second guessing. The woman who once promised to love me had been dead for a long time. I needed to stall. How long? I asked, gripping the USB tighter. Her smirk faltered. How long what? How long have you been working with Donovan? My voice was lower now, controlled. I could see the flicker of irritation on her face. Since before my uncle died? Since before we got married? She sighed, tilting her head. Does it matter? I clenched my jaw. It does to me. For a split second, she hesitated. I could see it, the calculation in her mind, deciding whether to tell me the truth or just shoot me and take what she came for. Then she chuckled. Fine, you wanna know? Donovan and I go way back. Your uncle, well, he had something that belonged to him, and I was the perfect in. You were just an unlucky idiot in the way. My stomach turned. Every single moment had been a lie. The late nights, the business trips, the sudden loss of interest in me. She was never mine. I exhaled sharply, pretending to relax. All right, Emily. You win. I lifted my hand slowly, the USB still in my palm. Her eyes lit up as she took a step closer, reaching out. I moved fast. I grabbed the gun with one hand and twisted her wrist hard. She yelped, firing a shot into the wall, but I was already pushing her backward. The USB slipped from my fingers in the struggle, clattering to the floor. She cursed, trying to elbow me in the ribs, but I slammed her against the shelf, making her drop the gun. I kicked it aside and grabbed her by the collar, shoving her against the cold steel wall. Her eyes were wide now. Scared. Not so fun when you're not in control, huh? I growled. She glared at me, panting. You think this is over? I smirked. No. But it's your turn to lose. I let her go and punched her across the jaw. Hard. She crumpled to the ground, unconscious. I grabbed the USB from the floor, my heart racing. I needed to get out. Donovan would be looking for her soon. I sprinted out of the vault, through the shop, and into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of my past. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing. I wasn't running away. I was about to find out exactly what my uncle had been hiding. And when I did, I was going to end this. I drove all night. Nowhere specific, just away. The USB drive sat in my pocket, feeling heavier than it should have. I had no idea what was on it, but I knew one thing, Donovan Reed would never stop coming for it. By sunrise, I pulled into an old roadside motel, the kind where no one asked questions. Inside, I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and finally, took a deep breath. It was time to see what my uncle died protecting. I plugged the USB into my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. One folder. One file. I clicked it open. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Bank records. Names. Transactions. But then, my stomach turned. It wasn't just money. It was corruption. Names of politicians, law enforcement, business moguls, all linked to illegal dealings. Bribes, offshore accounts, trafficking. And at the center of it all? Donovan Reed. I leaned back, my hands gripping my knees. My uncle must have stumbled onto this, tried to hide it, and paid the price. Donovan wasn't just some criminal, he was the key player in a multi-million-dollar operation. And now, I had the proof to burn it all down. I exhaled. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Not the police. Not the feds. Someone else. Someone who would make sure this information ended up in the right hands. The moment they answered, I simply said, "I have something you need to see." Then, I smashed my phone. No more tracking me. I grabbed my things and walked out of the motel, the USB still clutched in my palm. I had lost everything, my wife, my old life, my peace. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something new. Purpose. Donovan and Emily thought they could bury the past. But now? I was going to bury them.